Hello and welcome to Biblical Breadcrumbs. In this episode, we'll be in 1 Thessalonians 2, verses 17 through 20, as we look at the last four verses of 1 Thessalonians 2. Last time, if you remember what we were talking about, we were basically focusing on the theme of Thessalonica is really, really good. This time, in not this time like this episode, but in this instance of 1 Thessalonians 2, verses 13 through 16, Thessalonica is really, really good. The Jews are really, really bad. Thessalonica is great and faithful. The Jewish people around, the Jewish people in the area, they are not so much. They're actually not very good. And what that leads to for Thessalonica is a lot of suffering, a lot of pain, a lot of difficulty. But what Paul ends up saying in verse 14 and 15 and 16 is, you guys have suffered a lot, but that's been really good for your personal growth. Because when suffering happens, when persecution happens, when trials and difficulties arise, guess what? That makes you a mature person. That makes you a pretty grown-up individual. That makes you someone who is pretty well-founded in God, actually. So maybe it's not that bad of a thing after all. It's never fun to pull this to a different example. It is never fun when a young child loses a parent, when one of their parents dies. That's never good. That's never healthy. That's never how it should be. The child should have both parents. But when you look at that child, usually they mature a lot faster because they have to. And it's the same situation here. Neither situation is good in the sense of being pleasant. It's not enjoyable, it's not fun, it's not lighthearted and happy-go-lucky, and you don't have the time to grow into your role as you normally would, but you get a lot more things done really, really quick, and you mature a lot faster overall because of the terrible things that happen to you. We see that physically, it's the same spiritually. While it might not be fun to suffer or to be persecuted or to be attacked by other people, it can be really, really good for you as a Christian because you learn how to deal with the problems. And then you have however many years left on Earth, but you're already equipped to deal with those. And maybe that is not such a bad thing after all. Suffering can be really good. And even though the Jews are really going at the Thessalonians are sticking to their guns because they know the truth. They know Jesus, who rescues them from the coming wrath. Okay, with that in mind, Paul switches gears a little bit here. Let's talk about the whole book for just a second. In chapter 1, you had this picture of Thessalonica being really, really good because they obeyed God. And they're so good that they're an example to everyone else, every other church, every other congregation. They are just a wonderful example to all of them. When we get to chapter 2, Paul is commending them for that, and he's being impressed with them. In chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, he's essentially dealing with how impressed he is with them. He cares so much for them. He says, you guys are great. I am glad that I cared for you. You know how I cared for you. You know the work we went to. You know how much I tried to help you. Paul cares for them. In verses 13 through 16, you have another facet of that. Paul cares for them in that they're being persecuted, in that they are suffering, in that they are being attacked. Paul cares for them and sees how wonderful they're doing in that situation and is thankful for them. In verses 17 through 20, then, Paul cares for Thessalonica, and you see that in how much he cares. He's going to express his personal feelings here and how much he cares for them individually, in that they are going through a lot, and he's trying to be there to support them. He can't be there for reasons we'll talk about, but they are so good and so encouraging and so blessed that it's all okay. Paul cares for them. That's the theme of the second chapter, I think. Chapter 1, you're doing great. You're an example to everyone. Chapter 2, Paul cares about them, and wow, they are just they're amazing. They are so good, and we'll see so much of that as we go forward here today. Okay, not Acts. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. Let's start reading in verse 17. But as for us, brothers and sisters, after we were forced to leave you for a short time, in person, but not in heart, we greatly desired and made every effort to return and see you face to face. So we wanted to come to you, even I, Paul, time and again, but Satan hindered us. For who is our hope, or joy, or crown of boasting in the presence of our Lord Jesus at his coming? Is it not you? Indeed, you are our glory and joy. Paul here explains his own situation, his own feelings, his thought process, and his heart. He's explaining this to Thessalonica. Unfortunately, if you remember back to Acts chapter 17 in verses 1 through 4, I'm pretty sure it is, in Acts 17 verses 1 through 4, Paul comes to Thessalonica and he establishes himself. He's working with a synagogue there. It says he works for, I think it's, let me go look it up. Let me not just wing this. Let me go look it up. Acts 17 in verse 2, as usual, Paul went into the synagogue and on 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them from the scriptures, explaining Jesus. And several people follow him. After that, then, after those 3 Sabbath days, I assume they were consecutive, so he spent about 21 days in the city. I could be wrong, and different people debate how long he was there, but I think it's 3 weeks. I think it's 3 Sabbath days right in a row. 21 days in the city, and a mob forms and kicks him out. And then the mob chases him to the next city, Berea, and kicks him out of Berea as well. Paul explains his own situation in 1 Thessalonians 2 by saying, as for us, after we were forced to leave you for a short time, after the Jews had oppressed us so much, after the Jews and the synagogue, I mixed synagogue and Gentile, I don't know why, the synagogue people, after they attacked us and pushed us out of your city, they forced us away from you. We wanted to come back. Paul, Silas, and Timothy, they all did, but I'm going to shorthand that to Paul. Paul wanted to come back to them, but he was forced out of their city. He wants to return very dearly. Even I, Paul, time and again, he says in verse 18, I want to come back. I want to come back. It's not like Paul said, it would be nice to visit, but that's not working. Oh, I guess we can't visit. It's not like that at all. No, what's happening here is Paul is trying to get back to Thessalonica, and he's putting a lot of his effort into getting back to Thessalonica, it sounds like, and something is blocking him. Something is stopping him from being able to do that. Even though he wants to come and be present in Thessalonica, he's just not able to be. Why is that? Look at the end of verse 18. Who is getting in the way? What's the problem here? What is the obstacle that Paul cannot surmount? It's Satan who hindered us. What does that mean? This is a tangent, but what does that mean? Satan was in the way. Satan hindered us. Satan stopped us from doing that. What does that mean? Does that mean there was a devil figure with the red cape and horns and a tail, and he was standing in Paul's way, blocking the road? I don't think so. What could it have meant then? Maybe he's thinking of the Jewish people who, influenced by Satan, are ignoring the laws of God, ignoring God's words, and doing their own thing because they just want to. Maybe it's as simple as that the Jews resist them. Maybe it's something about the area. The area doesn't like Paul. Maybe whether geographically or demographically, they're not listening. They don't want him in their city, and so they will run him out if he gets close, or the geography makes him ill or something. He's allergic to that region and he can't stay for a long time. I don't know. I'm just kind of coming up with ideas because Paul does not specify what this means. Maybe it's that he's really busy somewhere else and he can't make time to go to Thessalonica because he has other work to do. I think he's in Corinth theoretically when he writes Thessalonians, which Corinth is a mess and they really need help. And so I'm sorry, guys, I just can't walk away from the ministry that I have. I can't walk away from these Christians to help you all because they need, honestly, a lot more help than you guys do. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's something as simple as there are storms on the road and he can't travel. Maybe it's that there are robbers and they will beat him and kill him if he tries to travel towards Thessalonica. I don't know. Something hindered him. Something that he labels as Satan. Maybe there were storms, maybe there were robbers, maybe the Jews were just so aggressive that he couldn't come back. Maybe, I don't know. But he doesn't attribute it to any of those things. He attributes it to Satan himself. I find this interesting. In the 21st century, and I don't want to go on a super long tangent about this, in the 21st century, we humans have a habit of looking to naturalistic explanations for everything, primarily found in the realm of science, primarily used by scientists, people who pretend to be accurate and looking for true answers. There are many people who are just looking for what ignores God and what natural explanation there could be. Why do you get sick? Well, it's because of whatever reason. You stood out in the cold too long, so you got germs from that. Or you touched something that had germs on it, so you got germs from that. Or you were around someone who's sick, so you got germs from that. Back in the day, they used to think that demons caused it. Do you see a difference in our worldviews? Back in the day, you used to have a worldview that was a little bit nutty sometimes, and that went a little bit crazy. They blamed demons for everything, and the devil and the witches, and you're getting cursed and all that. And I don't believe all of that. But there is some merit to having a worldview in which you look at the good things in life and bless God for them, and you look at the bad things in life, the sickness, the death, the disease, and you don't say, well, he died because, I don't know, he got sick, and that happened from whatever type of bacteria. Maybe sometimes we should say, well, that person died because Satan has attacked this world, has twisted the good things of God into something evil, and now life has an end to it because sin was introduced and broke our capacity for immortality. Sometimes maybe we need to be more active about crediting God with the good things and crediting Satan with the evil things, instead of trying to find natural, human, scientific explanations for all of these things. I don't know what got in Paul's way, but Satan was behind it. And Paul makes sure to not obscure the fact that Satan was behind it by saying, oh, it was the Jews, oh, it was the weather, oh, it was whatever. Let's have a more spiritual worldview and understand God and Satan behind things, instead of just having a boring natural worldview that doesn't account for God in our everyday life. If we had a more spiritual worldview, we'd appreciate God a lot more, we'd hate Satan a lot more, and we'd have a way more realistic view of things that are going on behind the scenes, because Satan's trying to fight God, and Satan's losing, but we don't get that picture often enough when we don't think about how they are acting in the world today. Satan is not a passive force. God is not a passive force. We don't have direct communication from either of them anymore, but they are very much active and working at opposite ends of the spectrum. Be thankful to God and hate the devil. I think that's probably a pretty healthy worldview to get in the mindset of. Paul is trying to come to Thessalonica. Tangent over. Paul is trying to come to Thessalonica, and Satan is prohibiting him. Whatever that looks like, Satan is stopping him. But Paul really wants to come. Why is that? Why did Paul want to come to them? Why did Paul want to be in their presence? Look at verses 19 and 20. Doesn't this just tell you all about Thessalonica? You're doing great. Excel still more. Doesn't this just tell you that? Who is our hope? Who is Paul's hope or his joy or his crown of boasting? That's some strong language. What is Paul's pride and joy in this life? What is Paul's pride and joy while he's on earth? What does Paul boast in? He boasts not in himself, but in how good Thessalonica is. They are his glory. They're what he's going to be wearing when Jesus is evaluating what Paul has done and how faithful Paul has been, and if Paul has actually done anything towards God. Jesus is going to look at Thessalonica and say, well, that's pretty indisputable. It's Paul's crown in the presence of our Lord Jesus at his coming. That's Thessalonica. No other church gets this. No other church gets this kind of commendation. None of them. This is just Thessalonica. Thessalonica is so good that they are the evidence of Paul's work for God. They are the evidence of Paul's heart and how much Paul cares and how much he's willing to do before God himself. God is my witness. You all are so good. You are what glorifies me. You, Thessalonica, glorify Paul in that you listened, in that you persevere, in that you stepped away from idols. You turned to God to serve the true and the living God and his Son, Jesus Christ, who rescues us from the wrath that is to come. 1 Thessalonians 1, verses 9 and 10, I believe that is. Thessalonica has a place with Jesus. So it's so rare for this to actually come up in the Bible, unfortunately, that these churches have a place with Jesus. Oftentimes we focus on churches where there are so many problems, and yes, there's still churches, and yes, there are faithful members, but not really, and you guys need to fix a lot of things. Thessalonica is the one letter in which Paul can say, you guys are with Jesus. You guys glorify him. You guys are acting like him. You're living like him. I don't need to tell you how to love people because God himself taught you and you just listen to him. That's chapter 4, I think. Thessalonica is evidence that Paul does good work. They have a place with Jesus, in Jesus' presence. Paul is going to be there. They are too. And Paul's encouraging them in that manner. At the same time, Thessalonica is also showing Paul the value of his work and that it's not all a lost cause. And while Paul is sitting in Corinth agonizing over how to deal with the Corinthian people and how to show them to Christ and how to pull them along forcibly if need be to take them to God and show them who God is, Paul is sitting there stressed, and he remembers Thessalonica, and he remembers it can be done, and he remembers 3 weeks in, and those guys are the best Christians that have ever been. Thessalonica shows Paul the value of work. Not only is Paul encouraging them by saying, you've got a place with Jesus, they are encouraging him by showing him there is a purpose, there is a point, your labor is not in vain. Several things we could draw from that last idea, from that last point. Just two ideas from there. Firstly, even Paul needs encouragement. The great apostle, this great worker who's willing to go out over all of the known world and preach the gospel to everyone, all sorts of people in every situation. This guy who's so great needs encouragement. With that, he's getting encouragement not from fellow apostles, not from fellow workers, not from people who have been Christians for 30, 40, 50 years. He's getting encouragement from people who got educated in Christ for about a month, and then he had to leave. He's getting encouragement from the inexperienced Christians, from the new Christians who are so enthusiastic and so dedicated and so willing to do their job that they inspire even an old-timer like him, quote unquote. They are so good that they're inspiring even Paul. If Paul needs encouragement, you do too. And on the flip side, even the most new, even the most inexperienced, even the littlest and least and most unimportant of Christians, seemingly, can have a great effect on people who've been faithful for a really, really long time. Never underestimate your influence, because it can have a really important role in helping the elders, the deacons, the teachers who are trying to help you. Your influence can have a big impact on them and how they're able to work for other people. That's the first idea. The second idea is built off of that, which is Paul is getting encouragement from these new guys, and all of this is happening. The Thessalonians' faith, the Thessalonians' groundedness, the Thessalonians' emulation of Jesus, the Thessalonians turning to God from idols to serve the true and living God, the Thessalonians' goodness and strength and power and everything is happening despite the fact that Satan is trying to hinder it. Satan has successfully blocked Paul in verse 18. Paul cannot at this moment return to Thessalonica for whatever the reason is. I don't know what the specific reason is, but Satan's gotten in the way so that Thessalonica will fall, right? So that Thessalonica won't have the encouragement, and they'll be persecuted and beat into the ground, and nothing's going to survive there. That's Satan's goal. And Thessalonica is the best group of Christians that's ever existed, for all intents and purposes. All of this is happening despite the fact that Satan is trying to stop it. You know what that means? God's people, when they're faithful to Him, God's people, when they're leaning on Him, God's people, when they actually go for God's help and they direct their lives after Him and dedicate themselves to Him, God's people win over Satan every time. And it may not look like you expect it to. You would expect winning over Satan to be that Paul can be at Thessalonica, encouraging them, teaching them, building them up. But actually, success looks a lot like Paul not even being at Thessalonica, and Thessalonica being new to the faith, and Thessalonica being the most impressive group of Christians that has ever been. Somehow, some way, they are beating Satan at his own game. Satan's getting in the way, and they're accepting it, rolling with the punches, and they're the ones who are winning. Satan's not too happy about that. But that's the power of having a true faith in God. Never underestimate what your faith can do to beat Satan with God's help, or to encourage other people, even other people who you think probably don't need it, probably are good enough, probably are encouraged enough or strong enough, or they don't need my effort. Yes, they do. Because your faith matters to God and to other people. And that's 1 Thessalonians 2. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed, hope you benefited. There's a lot in there, and yes, a couple tangents taken in this section, but hopefully those were logical enough and made enough sense that it was practical and usable. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you benefited. God bless. And I'll see you on the next episode of Biblical Breadcrumbs.